scary monsters don't just show up, one night of the year. Halloween, oh yeah, you get these costumed alien invaders of various sizes and shapes, and they're yelling, trick or treat. And oh, I'll tell you what, that's the worst for a dog who panics at the door. Our dogs have serious jobs to do, and that's why many of them react, but some of them are just scared witless, and we need to take care of them and make sure that nobody gets hurt, because a panicked dog can bite. In case we haven't met, I'm Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm a veterinarian. Oh, Cindy, thank you. By the way, if anybody can hear me real well, please hit the wow button just so that I know we're not experiencing, technical difficulties. And also, if you have any kind of question, interrupt me anytime. And if I'm saying things that are helpful, a heart, thank you. I've got hearts. That means somebody's anticipating some good things. And I want to introduce my sidekick, Miss America, my family border collie, and you can see that, this is the best that we're going to do for a Halloween costume. Do you notice we've got this collar on her that's flashing? It's pretty cool. You charge it on the computer, just plugging it in. When we take her for walks in the irrigation ditch at night, we're not going to lose track of her because she stays with us. But if a car comes along or one of these all-terrain vehicles, we want them to see her. We don't usually have it flashing like this. We usually have it just staying on. Maybe you can see that. It's pretty cool. This thing cost all of what, Carolyn, $15? $10. Got it on the internet. What was it called?
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.
We can tell them.
Yeah.
We can put a link on
Yeah, we can put a link on the Facebook page if anybody's interested. But this kind of thing just makes for a great safety device. And like I said, it's easy and cheap to use. And
comes in colors.
Yeah, it comes in different colors. That's right. Yeah. So anyway, she gets pink. And this is her Halloween suit because, it's the closest thing to a tiara I could find for Miss America, the beauty queen. So anyway, I also have Gaston here, the fuzzy white guy, and Tony, our other cat, showing up here. And I want to talk to you about dogs who freak out at the door. And I'm going to tell you a story. This is a case that I saw. Like so many dogs with serious behavior disorders, and cats too for that matter, there are multiple things going on all at once. But these are the relevant ones. This is a dog named Lola. She was about 15 pounds, a Cocker Spaniel, Terrier cross, sort of, probably a Heinz 57. And her history that she came in was that she was startling easily, and she was attention-seeking. She was pesky, which, by the way, a lot of people, without meaning to, encourage it. And they say, well, it doesn't bother me. I love my dog, and I want the physical attention, which is the reason we have pets. But dogs who pester for attention a lot are typically breaking a canine taboo by soliciting and demanding interaction with their leader because they're anxious. And this dog's anxiety was demonstrated that way, but also with people who she didn't know. And, Jonna, thank you for showing up, and I hope this is helpful to you. We decided to do this Facebook Live tonight, Wednesday, because tomorrow night's Halloween, and boy, of all the days of the year when a dog who freaks out at the door is going to have a big problem, it might be Halloween because, it's repetitious. They keep coming and they keep yelling and they keep looking, they're trying to look scary, and, to a dog who freaks out easily, they do. So here's Lola, who also barked aggressively at strangers when they came through the door, and she had nipped at a few people when she got frightened. So why was she doing this? Don't ever buy this nonsense that dogs are trying to dominate people. That's exceptionally rare. This particular dog was doing it because she was trying to drive off these, what to her were scary monsters. She came from a place in Las Vegas, New Mexico. We actually have a place called Las Vegas. It's not a gambling town, and it's not an entertainment venue. They have the state mental hospital there, and it's a northern New Mexico agricultural community. But there's a place there called Green Gates Animal Sanctuary where this dog was adopted from by her new family. Initially, she was found in a box with her litter mates and her mother on the side of the road when the babies were just 8 weeks old. You can pass judgment on people who do things like that. But the good news is that Lola and her family of litter mates and her mother were found, and they were placed in good homes. And when these folks adopted her, they they thought, well, this is a pretty shy puppy, but we're going to take her home and give her a great home. And little did they realize just how shy she was until they got her home, because everything caused her to freak out. And when I saw her, she was about 3 years old, and she had a long history of startling with just about anything, including people who she knew very well. This was a young couple. They were college students, and they had a couple of roommates, and she'd gotten to know them all just fine. But if one of them came in wearing a hat, she would wig out because, well, she wasn't used to it. So anyway, 3 months before I saw Lola the first time, she had been out for a walk with her folks, and there was another dog that she spotted and got so immediately panicked that she bolted so fast that she ripped the leash out of her person's hand, and as they put it, she ran her paws off. She got 1.5 miles home in the space of just a few minutes, and when they got her, and she was huddled up against the front door when they got there, of course, crossing roads and the rest of it, she had pretty severe abrasions on her paws. I mean, she was really panicked. Now, not every dog who freaks out at the front door when visitors come is this wigged out like Lola was, but she makes a good case for this. So I'm wondering, I mean, has anybody had that happen with their dog? I've got somebody else. And Deborah, thank you for coming. I'm delighted you're here. I've been swapping a couple of messages with Deborah on Facebook with questions about her pets. So, well, if anybody's had something like this, by all means, put it right in there. We can talk about it. But this dog her aggression was fear-related when she came to the door. And in fact, you have to understand that there may be multiple reasons why dogs do this. Some of them are really scared like Lola, but many of them are territorial, which, I mean, you want that. People come to the house and they may not have the best of intentions. You want your dog to make a lot of racket, because dogs are innately going to protect their territory and their social group. In the case of most of our pets, it may be the other pets in the family, but also the people. And dogs are innately that way because, well, in the wild, you know, they live in a state of scarcity. They have survived and thrived in all manner of harsh and difficult conditions over tens of thousands of years. Miss America, honey, hop back up here. That's a girl. And scarcity is really what drives them. In other words, the big famine is going to arrive in about 20 minutes, and if that dog doesn't get every single bite to eat, well, she may be the one who doesn't make it until springtime. And the same is true with protecting the territory, because in the wild, they might have just drug home a carcass, you know, with a few scraps of grizzle left on it, and they hope to survive on that for a few days. And there may be a rival group of dogs who's going to come and take that away. They have breeding females, and of course, besides survival, the other primary objective of any wild species is passing on their genetic code or reproduction. So females are a resource, and food sources are a resource, and the territory itself is. So our dogs, even though they're domestic pets and they belong with us, they still have those innate genetic programming in their brain, which means that when people come, they're going to raise a ruckus. So you have that, and then in the case of a dog like Lola here, you've got a lot of fear as well. And she had a history of nipping at people, and again, her basic issue was, get the heck out of here. So, you know, of course they didn't, they stayed. And so what are you supposed to do with your dog if he or she freaks out when the trick-or-treaters come to your house tomorrow night? Well, the first thing I'm going to recommend that you do is avoidance. There's this belief, and I understand it, that people feel that if they are going to ever improve their dog, that the dog has to have repeated exposures to these triggers, and that ultimately we can socialize the dog. Well, the concept is wrong. Socialization is a real process that occurs when puppies are 5 to 12 weeks old. And when they're that age, the developmental early stages in their brain's growth makes them open and amenable to being exposed to lots of different kinds of creatures. Dogs of different sizes and shapes, cats, people, children, that whole thing. But once that window of socialization, that developmental window has closed, well, that ship has sailed. And those dogs are who they are unless you very carefully and methodically reduce their sensitivity, which having trick-or-treaters come to the door does nothing actually but replay these ramp-ups in arousal, causing a dog who's frightened to actually replay these neural circuits, and actually those neural pathways become physically thicker and stronger. And with practice, they actually get, if you will, more skilled. And there's this adage in veterinary behavior medicine, I wish I could take credit for it, and it goes like this: if it can be predicted, it should be prevented, because practice makes perfect. And it looks like I may have a question. Other question, John, is it okay to declaw my 7-month-old cat? Let me finish up with this thing, and I'm going to definitely address that for you. That's a rather thorny issue, but I respect people who consider it, because you've got an issue that maybe I can help you with. So give me a second on that, John, and I'll circle back to that. So tomorrow night, if you've got a dog with a history of barking at the door, rather than keep the dog on a leash when the children come, or yelling and reprimanding, saying stop that, because we adults enjoy Halloween too. It's just fun to interact with the kids and give them treats and all that stuff. But your dog is having a problem, and if your dog panics the way Lola did on that leash walk, that your dog could lunge and bite. All right, so rather than try to manage your dog at the door, and we lost our lighting. What I want you to do instead is put your dog in a room as far away from your door as possible, and close the door and keep your dog occupied. Now, drowning out the sound can be a valuable thing, and what we have on this iPad, which has there we go, is music called Through a Dog's Ear. And I hope you can hear this. Actually, I mentioned last week about a research study regarding soothing classical music. And if you play something like that, or Through a Dog's Ear, which you can get on the internet, this is actually scientifically developed to Miss America's upside down and totally relaxed now. And even the cats look like they're enjoying it. But if you play this good and loud in a room at the far back end of your house, it'll help drown out the sound. If you have a, like one of these old-fashioned fans in a big rectangular metal box, not the tower ones nowadays that are intentionally quiet, but a good noisy one, and you can play it along with some loud, soothing classical music like Through a Dog's Ear. And also, if you think ahead and withhold your dog's meal so that they're food motivated, and then get a food toy. One of my favorites is the Twist and Treat, which you can pick up at a pet supply store like Petco or PetSmart, or a local pet supply store. But here's one that's among many, but what I like about it is you can put dry food in it, or you can put canned food, and then screw it back together, not completely, but you leave a little gap there. And, so your dog can work with it and manipulate it. It has this funky shape, which is intended to make it challenging for your dog to work with. But if you put canned food in it, you can stick it in a Ziploc in the freezer overnight, so that tomorrow evening, if you haven't fed your dog, and you can have a couple of these if you want, there you are, sweetheart, you can leave your dog with the food toy, and they can stay focused. In their mind, what they're doing is foraging for their survival. And you think, oh gee, I don't want my dog to be in that mindset. Food is abundant at our house. We have a good enough income, we can afford dog food. The dog shouldn't have to worry about that. Well, that's anthropomorphizing. That's putting a human emotion on a member of a different species, and they're not wired that way. They're built for scarcity. So let's use that to everybody's advantage. We have a dog who's hungry. You've made some somewhat challenging opportunities for the dog to survive the night. And if you've got frozen canned food in it, it takes a while to extract that, dog food popsicle out of there. And of course, at the end of the evening, when the kids have stopped coming and you go in and you say, well, gee, how did you do with your food toy? And your dog said, well, I've been working my little tail off trying to get the food out, and I haven't done a lot of work. I haven't accomplished a lot. Well, then you're going to feed your dog then. But you want the dog focused on something else, and you want to distract that dog with good, quiet music that will help physiologically promote alpha waves in the brain, and you want to diminish the sound by putting your dog in another room. So, how do you finally get your dog to stop wigging out at the door? I don't care whether it's Halloween or some other night. What can you do for the long term? Well, easiest way to have your dog be with you when you have guests is when you know that you're going to have visitors, you put the dog in the other room and you leave a leash on the dog, and then you invite your guests in. This is something other than Halloween, and they come inside and they have a seat and relax, and then you bring your dog out on a leash. And if you use one of these little lightweight carabiners that people use for, clipping keys to their belt or to their purse, whatever. I mean, you find it at the check stand at the local pharmacy, that kind of thing. Then you can have your dog tethered to you, but when you bring that dog out, your guests are already seated. And that matters a lot because from the dog's perspective, they're smaller and they're less of a perceived threat. Now, your friends aren't a real threat to your dog, but if you have a scared dog, that's the dog's perspective, especially when they walk in the door and your dog has no way to escape. You live in a house with walls, and your dog would love to get farther away from these aliens who've encroached on the territory, and your dog might be lunging and even growling and snapping. And people want to reprimand their dog. It's embarrassing, and you're concerned the dog might hurt people. Well, set the dog up for success. Dog's in the other room first. The sound is muffled. You could be playing the music, through a dog's ear for your dog prior to your guests arriving. You've withheld food. You've given the dog a food toy loaded with food, something like a twist and treat, but there are others. And then you let invite your guests in, and then they sit down, relax, serve them tea, a beer, whatever it is, and then go get your dog, bring it out tethered, and ask your friends not to pay any attention, and sit down with your dog, not real close to the guest necessarily, so your dog can be calm. And in fact, you can bring the food toy out so that it's next to you on the floor with your dog, and your dog feels safe. Now, when your friends are ready to get up and leave, or somebody needs to get up and go to the restroom or to the kitchen or something, ask them to warn you first so that you can take your dog back to the other room. You're setting your dog up for success rather than inadvertently allowing your dog to fail and then reprimanding or scolding. Some people feel like corrections with a leash on a choke or a prong collar is a good way to teach the dog, stop doing this. And of course, with behaviors we don't want, of course we want the dog to stop doing it, but in reality, there's nothing about punishment or reprimands that teaches the dog what to do instead of the behavior you don't want. And so going forward, what you're going to do is you're going to make it easy for the dog to relax and focus on something else. And then when the dog comes out later, when the guests are seated and the dog's still hungry, and you give the dog a food toy. And the nice thing about the twist and treat is that if your dog's had a hard time, you can say, well, we'll just make it a little bit easier and screw the two halves apart just a little more. Whoops, so there's a gap, or take it apart altogether. And your dog can work on that and actually get the reinforcer of the food while your friends are there. So what I'm going to do is address that question, Jana, about the, got a darn thing, there we go, on the cat declawing. I put a thing in my, it's in my Facebook page actually, I put it in just the other day, a question from somebody whose cat was ripping up the toilet paper. That's something that seems like it's great fun if you're a cat. And of course they have to sharpen their nails, and if your cat lives inside, they have to do, they've got genetic programming for their behavior, just like a dog has genetic programming for their behavior. And so cats need to sharpen their claws. Their claws anatomically are structured a lot like ours, except that rather than being flat on the end of their digits, they're very narrow, and of course they've got that claw shape to them. And so when the cat is outside and ripping against a tree trunk, for example, or a downed log, they're splitting little pieces of the claw off on the edges. So the claw is actually getting a little narrower, and they're sharpening the point by splitting the sides off, because that's what cats use to kill their prey. In the wild, they do not scavenge on dead stuff the way dogs do. They cannot survive on a vegetarian diet, which actually dogs can. They have to eat living creatures. They require a high protein, low carbohydrate, low fat diet, which is the reason these two little guys, Gaston and Tony, eat canned kitten food. Even though Gaston is 4 years old plus, Tony is 14. And the reason for the canned kitten food is that, number one, it's high moisture, which, especially on an older cat, is much more likely to keep their kidneys going better longer. But also the high protein of the canned kitten food is just about exactly the nutritional content of a mouse. And so, they're not going to get a lot of rodents, so they get canned kitten food, and they do great on it. So, if they're not out there killing rodents, they still have that innate instinct to sharpen their claws. It's just part of being a cat. And the other big reason that they do it is that there are these little chemicals called semiochemicals, and it's a pheromone-like substance. I have an upside-down border collie here. And they are actually swapping messages with other cats in the wild, others in their group, but others who might be coming near their colony. They're sharing information. And that's essential feline behavior. Never mind that your cats don't need their claws, and they don't need to share that information. It's essential to who they are, and they're going to do it. So with an indoor cat, you want your cat to do what they need to do. We certainly don't want to punish it. We want to give them appropriate places to do it. So cat trees that are where the post is wrapped with sisal rope, S-I-S-A-L, and we made a cat tree for our cats at our house. And these guys go up and they rip and they tear into it and they break off little bits of their claws. And there's a product, and in fact, Carolyn, if you would reach it for me, it's over there on the table. It's the Felis Scratch product. This is a wonderful product that let me turn the camera around and I'll show you this. There it is right there. It's called Felis Scratch. You don't need a veterinarian's prescription. You can get it on the internet. And Felis Scratch is something that, in fact, you can see the picture on the package. What they've done is they turn the scratching post on its side, and this stuff comes in a little dropper, and you dribble stripes of the stuff on the cat scratching post, and it has pheromones in it that attract the cat. In other words, it's a big sign that says, scratch here, okay? And you can use double sticky tape on your furniture where your cat might otherwise want to do it. There are other kinds of booby traps, and if you're interested in very humane but really effective, consistent booby traps, send me a message on Facebook, and I'll send you with your email address, and I will email you my a list of booby traps with web addresses. So you can use those as well. But again, we focus on the behaviors we don't want. Understandably, I get that. But we need to look at what's natural or what's the innate need of the pet. And that is, in the case of dogs who are scared at the door, they don't need to be scared. And if it's a cat who needs to scratch, they need to have a great place to scratch. You can go, by the way, to pet supply stores and get these things called cat scratchers. Some of them are meant to lay flat on the floor. Others are, on a slope. And it looks like the cross-sectional cut edge of corrugated cardboard wrapped up. And cats love to get their claws into that. They've got some others that are a tight weave, like an exterior carpet kind of a surface. And those, they love to rip into that. But one of the very best is just get a fireplace log and lay it on the floor. And they love that. So you want your cats to scratch. So occasionally we've got cats who just scratch and do a lot of damage to the floor or to their people. And there are ways of dealing with that behavior. And, for whatever their reasons, maybe we haven't been successful. And people say, I've got to put an end to this. And I'm going to have to put this cat to sleep or rehome it or have it declawed. Well, declawing can be done. Very few veterinarians do it anymore. Pain is a real consideration. There are ways of mitigating that. And is it something where the cat should endure it, or is euthanasia better? that's a conversation to have with your veterinarian. But I would really go to a veterinary behaviorist first. And if you have questions, Jonna, specifically about your cat, then put them on Facebook and let's swap information on that and see if we can find a way to avoid the surgery and get your cat's needs met and keep your home in good condition and you not getting scratched up. I feel horrible if I get her declawed. I used to look at it differently. I used to get them declawed with no problem, and now I think twice. Yeah, you know, when I was a veterinary student in the early 70s, it was one of the routine surgeries that we were taught. And in fact, through the 70s and 80s, you know, I mean, we know so much more now. And, you know, I just explained the fundamentals of the issue, but back then we just didn't know. Pain was not recognized in pets. I mean, that sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's the way it was. I've been at this long enough to tell you that I understand the history. And the profession has really gotten a lot wiser. We understand the neurologic pathways that are involved in pain. We know the medications to use. And behavior medicine, of course, has come a long, long way. And we have ways of not needing to do that. So again, Jonna, if you'll send me some of the details in a Facebook post, let me try to address those very specifically with you. And I appreciate the question. And I have no problem at all taking questions that are not related to the subject that I do in a given Facebook Live. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. I hope everybody has a fun Halloween tomorrow night and that your dogs don't get freaked out by the scary monsters at the door. And so, by the way, if you have any suggestions for a Facebook Live, by all means post them. And, oh, excuse me, there's Gaston back there starting to scratch on my chair. And he's not downstairs where the scratching post is, so he got started on the chair. So anyway, thank you again for tuning in. And you can get my Facebook Lives every Tuesday morning in your email box, along with my weekly, what we call a media blog, which is actually a newspaper column where I address questions every week in the Albuquerque Journal on Fridays, and then I post them on for my website subscribers on Tuesday mornings. So you go to my website, which is drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com, no S on my name, and you can subscribe. It's no cost. And in fact, when you do, I will send you at no cost my free at-home pet first aid and CPR guide. So subscribing, you can get this stuff every week. And of course, you'll find that on my Facebook page because I'll post it there and I'll answer questions. And I'll be back next week on Thursday evening, which is the night that I usually do it at 6 o'clock. And the day before, I'll post the subject that we'll be covering. And again, if you have any particulars that you'd like me to do, by all means. So thank you. And Miss America, who's quite relaxed here, say goodbye to our friends. Can you sit up and say good night? She says good night. Tony says good night, and Gaston's on the floor. He's waiting for more dinner. Thanks.